Our next speaker is Mr. David Luber, the Executive Director of the United States Cyber Command. The leaders of US Cyber Command played a critical role in developing this year's conference theme, Defending Forward. And US Cyber Command continues to defend forward around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, the Executive Director of the United States Cyber Command, Mr. David Luber.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here today. And again, thanks for the introduction. Again, my name is Dave Luber. I'm the Executive Director of the United States Cyber Command. I'm also an NSA Senior Executive on joint duty to US Cyber Command. I've had about almost 33 years of experience working in the domain of cyber, both defense and on the exploitation side. So it's really great to be here today for this fourth annual conference of International Cyber Conflict, CyberCon USA. I appreciate the opportunity to speak and to talk about the impacts of defending forward. So here we are at the end of November, nearly 1 year out from our 2020 elections in the United States. And of course, we're in great power competition across the globe, and that's dominating our headlines every single day. Defending the nation in cyberspace requires a whole of government and whole of nation approach, as you all know. That's why you're here today, to talk about how we partner together. So I also want to thank you for taking the time to be here today, since I know that cybersecurity and cyberspace operations are a 24/7, 365-day effort. And we've got to make every second count. I will speak to you today about US Cyber Command working with US government partners, with industry, and across the globe to bolster cybersecurity for our nation and our national defense strategy. So we all know it's a changing world. If you look back in 1999, I was only about a decade into my career with the National Security Agency. The internet at that time was mostly used for a domain of the US government, and we were just starting to use that domain for industry and academic institutions. When the information superhighway was built, cybersecurity was really not part of that process. In fact, it was something that folks tried to add on to the internet as it evolved over time. And at that time in 1999, government was the leader in technology development. And as we know, the internet is becoming a driving force in every facet of our lives. Also at that time, NSA was beginning to focus on its foreign intelligence collection using the internet, focusing on data at rest. And US Cyber Command was still a decade away from even being in existence as a command. Today, internet technology permeates every aspect of our lives. So we're in an explosion of data. There's an explosion of the number of devices connected to the internet. And when you think about the increasing role of 5G and establishment of technologies using the Internet of Things and hyper-connected cities, it brings new risks and challenges for every one of us here in this audience. So it broadens the attack surface, and it also potentially creates new vulnerabilities that we're all going to have to address. The relevance of cybersecurity as a strong discipline is absolutely paramount to what we do for the future of our nation. It's always going to be a constant balance between securing the data and networks and the power of how data improves our everyday lives. So let's talk about the threat landscape a bit. Our adversaries also recognize the power of the data and how they subvert technologies that are meant to keep us connected as a world. We've seen a wide range of activities over the past decade: espionage and exploitation, disruption and destruction, even corrosion of our environments in society. National security, defense, and DoD cyber strategies call out a new era of strategic great power competition. Near-peer competitors mount seamless seemingly discrete cyber operations to achieve their strategic objectives. So let me talk about China for a minute. A staggering degree of intellectual property theft to bolster their political, military, and economic goals. No American industry is immune from Chinese attempts to gain unfair competitive advantage. They use the technologies meant to connect the world to control their populations, as evident in their surveillance and authoritarian tactics in Hong Kong and in smart cities. Let me talk about Russia for a moment. Information warfare, often using U.S. infrastructure and technologies to sow and amplify divisions within our society, attempting to erode trust in the democratic institutions while creating divisions among allies. Let me talk about Iran for a moment. They use cyberspace and cyber-enabled technologies to attack the U.S. and our allies, or directly via allies. North Korea, pursuing weapons development, often funded by cyber theft, and also countering violent extremists. Organizations that we still need to keep an eye on as we continue to fight this particular threat. So today we're at a strategic inflection point, folks. National and DoD strategies point to a critical turning point. As the National Defense Strategy notes, we are in that new era of strategic competition, coupled with game-changing technological advancements which could challenge our nation's military superiority, undermine our economy, or weaken our democratic institutions. So as a nation, how do we respond? And what we will do, what will we do to shape this environment for decades to come? It must encompass not just the near term, what we're doing today, but also what we're going to do in the future for our nation. So let me talk to you a little about Cyber Command and how we contribute to a better future in cyberspace. As many of you know, the mission of United States Cyber Command is to direct, synchronize, and coordinate cyberspace planning and coordinate planning and operations, defend and advance national interest in collaboration with domestic and international partners. We are also responsible for providing that critical mission assurance to our Department of Defense networks, deterring or defeating strategic threats to national interests and critical infrastructure and key resources, and really important, helping combatant commands achieve their mission through cyberspace. So that's really important because out there, when you think about all the different combatant commanders, think about Central Command, European Command, Indo-PACOM, as they conduct their operations and their activities in cyberspace, we, U.S. Cyber Command, are there supporting them to help make sure they're successful in both defending their networks and also providing options for cyberspace activities. At U.S. Cyber Command, we are located at Fort Meade, Maryland, with about 1,500 full-time personnel, military, civilians, and contractors. Overall, our cyber mission force is spread across all the services: Army, go Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and the cyber mission force. And that cyber mission force is manned at approximately 5,000 service members from all branches and civilians in our cyber mission force, including, and we're getting to about a build of about 6,200 personnel. So we're at 5,000 now, moving smartly towards 6,200. We also have Guard and Reserve personnel on active duty serving within our force. We're an enterprise. When you think about an enterprise, we have Cyber Command individuals at all the combatant commands supporting their work. We have teammates in Hawaii, Georgia, Texas, Fort Meade, and all, they're not different elements, they're all working together as an enterprise, as a team, and a team of cyber warriors. Our greatest partnership is with the National Security Agency, working side by side to defend our critical infrastructure from malicious cyber activity. As you know, when I think about that, it makes me think about the new strategy of defending forward. And that's where we have a chance to see what our adversaries are doing in cyberspace And now that we have this new authority that was granted to the department from National Defense Authorization Act of 2019, it allows our DoD defenders to operate outside of Department of Defense networks. That's a big difference. Before NDAA 2019, we were only defending inside of our networks. Now, when invited by our allies, we can now work to help defend inside of our allies' networks. So that's a big change for the department. And we're seeing some very interesting malware when we're working with our partners defending forward. When we do find that malware, we take that information and we share that broadly with industry and the rest of government. Also part of this strategy of securing DoD networks from malicious cyber activity, including working with and supporting the Department of Defense Information Networks, is an important part of making sure that we protect our own DoD networks. So defending forward, also making sure we defend inside of our DoD networks. So what are we doing to defend the nation and securing the future? Again, alongside our greatest partner, the National Security Agency, we have a full range of cyber options. And those partnerships, as I mentioned earlier, with our combatant commanders, is actually there to support and defend critical infrastructure and to support the warfighter. As cyber protections teams deploy around the globe, achieving defense in depth capabilities and expanding response options to the nation, we are coming into a new area where cyber capabilities are considered part of the full spectrum of military operations. No longer that special capability off to the side, but actually part of what we would consider to be the capabilities of a combatant command as they achieve their objectives in cyberspace. We are also out there focusing on an area that we like to call persistent engagement. So I'm going to talk about persistent engagement for a moment here, and really we break down persistent engagement in two categories: enabling and acting. In enabling, what we talk about is making sure that with our partners, we're sharing intelligence and shoring up their defenses so that we can make sure that our nation is protected. So think about sharing information with FBI and DHS on election security, enabling those partners to make sure that we have defensible systems. And acting, in this case, taking action as authorities allow, and as I mentioned earlier, that opportunity to share malware at the unclassified level, that's a form of taking action. It's a form of presenting and partnering with industry to share malware on public websites and allow that crowdsourced community to take a look at those advanced persistent threats and then help to identify and attribute that particular malware to a particular actor. We believe this is both helping improve the world from a cybersecurity standpoint and also helping inoculate threats around the globe. We have continued with the cybersecurity community, attributing recent samples posted to public forums of malicious DPRK cyber actors as an example. With persistent engagement, I also wanted you to think about the Russia Small Group. If you're not familiar with the Russia Small Group, I'll just talk about that real quick. It was an effort between United States Cyber Command, the National Security Agency, and our partners to defend our midterm elections in 2018. It was an absolute top priority for the command and also for NSA to make sure that we had safe and effective midterm elections. It meant that we had to bring together the best intelligence, the best cyber operators, and the best strategy and plans in cyberspace operations to ensure that we could thwart any adversary that was trying to conduct malign influence against our U.S. elections. And I think we were very successful because we were able to bring together some of the new authorities, the new policies that came out in 2019, and most important, the people. The men and women in uniform and civilians, both from the National Security Agency and U.S. Cyber Command, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and from industry, that's the team that made it successful. That team sport in cyberspace and cybersecurity that allowed us to focus on ensuring that we had safe and effective midterm elections in 2018. So whole of government, between industry, partners, that's the outcome that we're looking for, not only for the 2018 midterm elections, but also the activities that we're looking forward for 2020. So when we did find something that was anomalous, we worked very closely with DHS and FBI, and in turn, they worked with the states and the social media companies to make sure that they understood what those threats were and that they could take action. In other areas, again, going back to persistent engagement, that was the enable part of persistent engagement. We also took action to help make sure that we had safe and effective 2018 midterm elections, making it more difficult for our adversaries to malignly influence the American people. While I cannot share the details of what we do or what we were able to do from the action standpoint in this venue, I can tell you that the action was authorized and the mission was in cyberspace, and we continue to work closely with our partners today. And again, as we look forward to the 2020 elections, we just announced at the end of last month with our USCYBERCOM combatant commanders and partners and the State Department our State Department partners that US Cyber Command had a team that was again in Montenegro working with the Montenegrins, cyber defenders, to hunt for adversary malware in their networks. This was at their invitation. On their networks to defend various critical networks and thereby improve their network defense and helping also improve the security for the United States. So we learned about the malware to defend the US and our allies. It also, as we learn about this malware, it also helps to make sure that we defend our democratic processes through these defend forward operations. So again, I think these are really great examples of the kind of work that we've done and the kind of work that we're going to be doing more of in the future when we talk about persistent engagement, enable, and act. As I previously mentioned, cyber is a team sport. We need industry, we need government, and we need our partnerships with academia to work together to thwart some of these really sophisticated threats. So I talked about persistent engagement. I'm going to talk quickly about persistent presence. First, domestically, working the online partnerships across interagency and private sector, we make sure that we can collaborate to have a whole of government effort and find more effective ways of sharing information continuously with our partners. Basically, some of the lessons learned from Russia Small Group demonstrated that it was a need for constant exchange back and forth. And we're continuing to focus on that in our persistent presence activity. By streamlining some of the policy issues, working closely with DHS and FBI, we're able to get at indicators of compromise directly down to industry very quickly. And in persistent presence, that's also a part of our goal to make sure that we have the opportunity to be present in foreign space and cyberspace opportunities. Second, we are conducting operations to identify adversaries and to counter those threats. And again, back to working with industry, as I just pointed out, with the malware disclosures is another great example. It demonstrates that we can take information that we've seen in foreign space and share it with industry with a goal of getting ahead of some of these adversaries. So I talked about persistent engagement. I talked about persistent presence. I'm going to talk about persistent innovation. So innovation. Cyberspace is under constant change. In fact, since I've been standing here in the last 20 minutes or so, there have been changes to the internet. There's been changes to cyberspace. It requires us to constantly innovate. And just as an example, antivirus companies have updated their signatures in the last 15 minutes since I've been standing here. There's been new malware created. There's been new vulnerabilities detected in software that we use in the US and with our allies. So that requires us to think about constant innovation. And one of the areas that I'm going to talk to you about that we've invested in as part of our innovation portfolio in Cyber Command is a location called Dreamport. So Dreamport is located in Columbia, Maryland. And if you want to look it up on the internet, you can look it up as dreamport.tech, dreamport.tech. And you can see some of the unclassified problem sets that we're working on as a team with industry and with academia to focus on some of those challenging problems that we face in making sure that we can secure our networks. So we've hosted a number of rapid prototyping events, and we've hosted a number of visitors. About 14,000 visitors so far have come into Dreamport to see the work that we're doing. And those rapid prototyping events that I mentioned earlier have resulted in contracts. And those contracts sometimes are with big companies, and sometimes those contracts are with small companies. And what we're really looking for is not necessarily the size of the company that's coming to bring us a solution, but really those innovative ideas that are coming from industry and that are coming from academia to help us work some of those challenge problems. This past summer, I had several co-op students and even some high school students working at Dreamport as well, working on a variety of projects. And I tell you, I'm really amazed at some of the ideas and solutions that those young adults came up with when they were dealing with some of the challenge problems. So we'll continue to focus on innovation as part of our innovation portfolio at US Cyber Command to ensure that we are always persistently innovating. And we also want to help make sure that as we're innovating, that we're helping grow the next generation of cyber experts, not only for the US government, but also to help support critical infrastructure. So earlier, when I arrived here today, I had a chance to speak to some of the West Point cadets and also VMI students. So congratulations to all of you on the work that you're doing. And it just is really great to see all the effort that you're putting into your studies and your capstone projects. It also identifies how important cybersecurity education is and how critical it is to our nation. So at US Cyber Command, working with our partners at NSA, not only are we working with the academies and the the military colleges, but also the centers of academic excellence across the nation. There are more than 300 universities now that are certified CAE schools. And we're making sure that we not only bring the best talent to the US government, working with those schools, working with the professors and working with their programs, but we also want to make sure that there are great research opportunities for those schools as well. At US Cyber Command, we're working closely with about 50 of those schools at this time, and we're continuing to build our partnerships as we move along and as we mature as a command. So it's not only identifying that top talent, but also presenting those challenging research opportunities, as I mentioned, and also bringing in the students for some summer internships, whether it's within the classified environment or over at Dreamport. We look for opportunities both on the NSA side and the Cyber Command side to bring talent in to work really challenging cybersecurity problems. You know, I've been working academic outreach with NSA and the command now for about 10 years. And I tell you, it's really important to work very closely with the faculty members. It's not just the students, but it's also the great leadership that we have in faculty members that really help focus those students towards those challenge opportunities, those capstone projects, and making sure that they have a great curriculum to work from. In addition, you know, we always think about universities. I mentioned some of the high school students that worked with us in Dreamport. Working closely with NSA, we also have a very they have a very strong K through 12 program called GenCyber. If you haven't looked at the GenCyber program, look at nsa.gov. You'll be able to look at some of the examples there. But I will tell you that's you know, a great opportunity to work with the students at a very young age to focus them towards STEM programs and to help them identify their interests in some of those STEM fields. in my previous assignment, I was the director of NSA Colorado, and I had a chance to visit one of the GenCyber camps that was going on in the Denver area. And this was, about a dozen or so young female students, ages 12 through 14. They were learning Python, they were learning robotics, and really focusing on a number of different STEM opportunities. But here's the kicker. They had to do all their presentations in Mandarin Chinese. So talk about multidisciplined, talk about the opportunities to really identify how different skills come together, both language and technical skills. Those students had a blast, and I really enjoyed watching them as they progressed through their studies. It also, I want to talk to you about diversity, because when we look across society, when we look across innovation, we need diverse ideas. We need to tap into diverse opportunities across our nation. Just a couple weeks ago, I was out at the Asus Conference in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And if you don't know what Asus is, it's the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. And I got to meet some amazing students. They have some wonderful ideas, and many of them want to come work with government and really help protect critical infrastructure and be part of the cybersecurity community. So in short, I will tell you, making sure that we invest in and focus on cybersecurity education, even left of launch of a student's career with the U.S. government, is absolutely critical. And I really enjoy that opportunity. So in closing, I'd just like to say it's been great here to speak to each and every one of you. I had a chance to talk to you today about what we're doing as a command. I had a chance to talk to you about the Defend Forward opportunities that we've been engaging in. I talked to you a little bit about persistent engagement, that opportunity to enable and share intelligence and share information with our partners. And I also talked to you about, when authorized, our opportunity to act, to make sure that we protect our nation and our allies. I also talked to you about persistent presence and persistent innovation, and our ability to work with students across the U.S. to ensure that we have the best and the brightest, both in our military academies and also our universities, ready to come work with and partner with the U.S. government in the future. So with that, I have a few minutes here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions there may be from the audience. Yes.
Okay. I have a.
I think you got a prize.
Oh, okay. It's not a cuddly thing for my child to take home. It's actually a speaker. Sidney Friedberg, Breaking Defense. Obviously, there are things you can't talk about and we don't want you to talk about. But in terms of operating forward, obviously when an ally, you now have the authority when an ally says, please come help me, to actually come help them, which is great. But there is a lot of stuff out there that's so-called gray space. I mean, in general terms, what authorities do you have, what ability you have to collect information, at least in gray space? I mean, all of us can go and look on websites wherever and run publicly available tools on them. But what is your presence in that gray space? How does that fit into this wider concept of engaging persistently and forward?
So I won't be able to talk about any specifics, but what I'll tell you is United States Cyber Command is engaged in full spectrum cyber operations, everything from defense all the way into working in and having presence in foreign space. Though, again, I won't be able to talk to you about areas where we have presence, but it is our intent and it is what we train for, and it's what we're authorized by the department to work in an area of full spectrum cyber operations. Again, I'm not going to go into the specific tradecraft that we use in US Cyber Command. If we want to talk about Defend Forward, I can talk to you a little bit about the fact that in Defend Forward missions, we have worked with permission from partners like partners in the Ukraine, Macedonia, and Montenegro to help those partners defend their critical networks.
Hi, Mr. Luber, Mark Armrow with Domain. This is quite an interesting mic here. Picking up on what you said about support to other combatant commands, I know that the services are currently building out the cyber operations integrated planning elements, but from the US Cyber Command side, can you share maybe how that build is going and maybe what that has meant for integration of cyber operations with those other combatant commands?
So you mentioned our cyber operations integrated planning elements, part of the Cyber Command team that works closely with combatant commanders around the globe. And as I mentioned earlier, that opportunity to make sure that cyber is part of the normal planning process and normal application of military power. That's where our teams are working very closely with the combatant commanders to make sure that cyber is not that special capability off to the side, but it is part of the everyday activities as combatant commanders wish to be successful and need to be successful, both in defending their networks and also conducting other activities in cyberspace. So I think I am getting the hook here, and I really appreciate again the opportunity to speak to all of you today. And best of luck on the rest of your conference. Thanks.